This past November, I had the great opportunity to talk to Janet Evans, the software development manager for the Chandra X-ray Center data system. She has worked in this position since the fall of 1998. However, as you will hear in this interview, software development was not her first career choice. Through the interview, you will hear how she realized her mind was good for solving technical problems. We will talk about how she landed in a great position thanks to a stick to it attitude. And she also provides examples of how important it is to work as a team and how finding a good mentor helped her. Of course, we also discuss her work for the powerful Chandra Space Telescope and many more things. So thank you very much for being here with me. I'm here with Janet Evans. She is actually a software manager at the Center for Astrophysics in Harvard, Massachusetts. So very important place. I'm so excited that talking with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm very interested about your career path, and let's start. I know that you studied in college biology.
I did.
And what motivated you to go in science?
Yep, I'm going to say that when I was growing up, I always loved animals, and I was always good at math and science. So I thought I was going to college to become a veterinarian. So the biology degree is what took me there. But when I was there, I found that you really test yourself, because high school was a little easier, but the volume of information comes at you a little stronger in college. So for me, the biology was a lot of dry memorization, which didn't come to me naturally. So along the way, I took a computer course and I found my niche. It was problem solving with a small language and a big problem, but then you could apply the solution to the problems that you were presented, as opposed to the biology, which was a lot of memorization, as I mentioned. So when I was there, though, at this point, I was already a junior. So I was third year into college and decided that I should finish my biology degree because it was almost done. I took all the rest of my electives in computer science, so I got a minor. And I came out looking for software in science, and I found astronomy.
Wow, that's a very important point that you mentioned, that there is the mind that is good for memorizing and
Yes.
the mind to solve problems.
And it's actually true, because I've had friends that were the biology majors, and they were so good at it, and I couldn't understand because I had to study and study and study to remember those, big long words that just didn't come to me naturally. But they were terrible in the computer classes. So I really did learn at that point that we have an affinity to a certain area, just the way our minds work. And so I went where for me, it felt right. And it really did click. And I said to myself, if I'm going to do something for the rest of my life, it's nice to do something that you have an affinity for and that you find that you're good at and you enjoy.
Yes, and it is, even if you finish biology, you were able just to move to a different area in science.
Right. And honestly, when I first came out, I thought I might go to a biology lab and do software. I wasn't leaving it out because I had done enough to get my degree. But I found astronomy, so that's where I've stayed for my whole career.
When you were, one of the things that I like to know from people, when you were a child, were you curious, were you technical, creative, or your parents motivate you in
I have to say, honestly, both my parents are really laborers. They were blue-collar workers, and they gave us a lot of independence. But everything from my education really was sort of what I learned at school, what I felt internally myself. I didn't have parents really leading me down this path. It was something that I found on my own.
I think it is good. Some parents are good in leading their kids to be successful, but it's not necessary, right? It depends on you.
But the part about my parents, they were hard workers. So I've always told folks that I'm a white-collar worker coming from a blue-collar family, and that hard work, I think, has driven a lot of my success in my career.
Yeah.
Yes. And that stick-to-it attitude and the make it happen, which is, it doesn't matter what your career is, those are important attributes to have.
Yes, and it is not only for you, but also for wherever you work, right?
Yes,
That you put
yes.
your weight on
Yes,
that.
you work hard and people notice.
Yeah.
So even for me, I started out at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics as a data aide. So in those days, I wrote programs and I ran programs for scientists and plotted up their results. And I worked that way. And then, they saw my hard work and my desire really to be a programmer. So then I got the promotion to a programmer, but that took a year and a half. So I didn't start even with what I thought I was going to start with from college. I started at one step lower.
So you didn't need to have the perfect job from the beginning.
And I think it's important. I think really when you graduate from college, you really need to kind of take what comes to you and put your time in, and then you can sort of see the next step. But it doesn't always come the way we have it in our mind as to what the steps are of your career. Sometimes you start a step lower, sometimes you might start a step higher.
Yeah.
And all of that is great, but you have to sort of take what comes to you and put in the hard work.
Then, after all that work, you started as the manager and leading this pipeline group in this very cool telescope, right?
And I'll tell you even a few steps. So I started as that data aide, and then I became a programmer, and then I became a team lead. So I had a little group that did the pipelines and tools for Chandra. But then just before launch, the way things worked out, I became the software development manager. And there were 50 developers on the team at the time. And I felt like I was ready for the job, but that was a big step too. And I went from a team with 13 developers on the team when I was a team lead of pipelines and tools to the 50 when we were just prior to launch and ready to launch Chandra.
Right. Tell us a little about this telescope.
So Chandra is a X-ray telescope. It's a space-based telescope, so it's a satellite, and X-rays. You have to have a satellite for that kind of astronomy because you have to get above the radiation belts around the Earth. So if we didn't have the radiation belts, the X-rays would hit us, and that would be a bad thing. Yeah. So these kind of telescopes go above the radiation belts, and they go into a big elliptical orbit around the Earth, and they collect photons of light in X-ray, and that's the very high energetic things that go on out in the universe.
Yeah, and the group that works with the pipeline, it is important for you to get the data and kind of put them in a state that the scientists can use
write their papers.
Right?
Right. That's our goal, is to meet the needs of the science community, to meet the needs of our users. So we take the data, which is in a very raw format and comes down very bit-packed from the telescope, and then we transform that data into a format that the scientists can use to do their research. We put it into a database and an archive so that it's not only available for the scientist who had proposed time for Chandra, but then after it's available for any scientist in the world who wants to use that data to do research.
And that's very important that it's in there, as you said, not for only the person that proposed the observations, but even for others and future generations, right?
That's right. We feel like the archive is, the place for the data, and we work really hard at defining the formats of the data, defining all of the metadata, the data associated with the images and the tables that we're storing, so that it describes the data that's being stored in the archive, so that not only this generation, but generations to come can really unpack it and use it to the most useful scientific use that they can find.
And you say that, for example, your team first was small and then grew. How important is for you, even if it is a small or a big group, that all work together towards the same goal? I mean, how important is the teamwork?
The teamwork is extremely important for this kind of work. We work with scientists, so we're a team with a scientist, and then within the software group, we're a team together, and we have certain coding standards we have to follow. We have partnerships, and we pair up to develop certain pieces of code, and we work hard to keep that team mentality because everybody owns a piece of a very big system, and it enables us to work together closely to reach the bigger goal, and the bigger goal is to meet the needs of the scientists. And it takes teamwork to do that.
And how difficult is to manage such a big team?
Well, in the early days, it was challenging. And so a lot of what we had was certain rules we were supposed to follow, but sometimes we had to break them down into simpler rules so that people could manage them better. And then the simpler rules we built up, like we needed to have requirements to write the software, but people weren't experts at writing requirements. So instead, I said, well, let's take them the way we can. If it's a whiteboard session, if it's a prototype piece of software, if it's an email message, if it's a use case, which is a way of saying how I would use the software as a scientist in the end game, but all those give us clues to how to write the software. But then there is a formal process where you write that all down so that not only the team that built the software, but the team that comes 5 years later, 10 years later. We talked about Chandra, but I don't think we mentioned the time. Chandra launched in 1999. So right now it's 25 years old. So there's certainly many new people who've had to pick up software that the earlier team of 50 wrote, and right now my team is 20 because as time has passed, we're not writing so much new code, but we're maintaining the code that we need. And we're adding new algorithms, and we're adding some new features, but that's a smaller effort than keeping it current with the current operating systems and the current versions of other software that we have to pull into our system to make the whole system work for us.
So you had to develop a system as you went by, and as you were saying, you probably didn't follow at that time the formal process of creating requirements and
right,
things like
that.
that.
Right, because that was too hard for the group, right? That's how you do that team building. But then we transformed those more informal requirements into formal requirements because we had all the information we needed to do it. So the step wasn't skipped, but how you got there, you have to pave the path that makes sense to the group.
That's an important thing. And what is the thing that you like more of the work that you do?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I really loved programming when I did programming, and that was where I started. But when I became a manager or even a team leader, which was before that, I feel like now, so before when I was a programmer, I got this much work done. Now I get this much work done because I can influence the work that the whole team produces, and working at that 2 steps higher level was a good place for me. There are people in this field that start similar to how I am, but they want to always stay in software and they want to keep learning the new techniques, and that's fine. We call them, in our group, the guru software developers. Yeah. But then there are other people who go this other path, which is the path that I took, that that goes more towards the managerial aspects of it, but I get a lot of joy out of that.
Yeah, that's you are able to get the big picture of what is needed.
Right, you get the big picture and you're steering a big group. So now I can talk about maintaining a system with 1.8 million lines of logical code as opposed to my code, which maybe would have been 10,000 lines or 20,000 lines of code.
Yeah,
little. So it's so much larger.
What would be your advice for people that are starting in this career? What would you want to tell them?
Well, if they're starting in any career, if they wanted to go towards software development, it's sort of the STEM folks. It's people who like science and math in high school and who have sort of this creativeness about them to sort of take a small set of rules, but then do problem solving to solve a bigger problem. I think, I thought I did pretty well. You go there originally with something that's in your sort of heart and soul, and you think you want to go after, as I thought I was going to be a veterinarian, but then you explore a little bit and see what really pops up. And, if you can get that feeling that something just feels right for you, then I say go for it. Because that's a real special feeling. And, despite what we all want to think, we work for very many years in our career. Yeah. So if you're doing something that's interesting, feels right for you, and is fun, then you've kind of got the golden egg. That's the best we can that's the best we can hope for. And I think I found that for myself.
That's a great thing, really, to really find something that you really enjoy. It's not a hard thing to go to work, right?
Right.
You really...
I would also say something else. If somebody's new in their career, and I had this, is to find a mentor at work. Find somebody who you respect, who's a little bit older than you, has been down the path that you think you want to go down, and work with that person and, befriend that person and see what they can teach you, because you might have a few mentors and there might be a few directions for you to go. And I have a mentor that I found when I first went to work, and she helped me from that very early job of writing programs for scientists and just working one-on-one to making it to a software team, and then, then I picked up and went from there. I'll have to also say, because I got that minor in computer science, when I was working, I went for 4 years after work to Harvard and got my degree in software engineering as well. So I didn't just take, so you're always learning throughout your career, and you either do it formally by being in a class, you read papers, you read books, you take online courses, but I'm always looking to have that toolbox, is what I call it, as full as it can be.
Yeah, I know people that have changed also that field, that they are very good in writing code, and eventually, even if they had other career, were able to get a job.
Right.
But you also, on top
But
of that,
then you want to
had
emphasize it and make sure that you have everything you need to do that work.
Yeah, and you talk about the mentoring. I think it is good to have someone that has experience and gives you pointers,
Yes.
point to the right people to
Yes.
talk to. So I think that's very important.
I do too.
Thank you so much.
You're
it was
welcome.
great. Your
welcome.
career is wonderful, and thank you for all the advice. I appreciate that having this conversation with you.
I appreciate that you asked me to do it. I feel strongly to lead folks down a nice path and have a few examples out there to see how other folks did it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you like the interview and the information in this channel, remember to subscribe and also follow me on my website.